Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to today and to presenting a little bit about the work that we do at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. I will be talking primarily a little bit about how we use applied strategic foresight and future studies to work exploratively and structurally around the future. But also I will be talking about the concept of liquid society and liquid consumers, in the sense that we are seeing already now and increasingly going forward that our societies and our consumer behaviors are becoming much more liquid, in the sense that the boundaries between what has before been more or less fixed entities is becoming more and more blurry. Our behaviors, lifestyles in online worlds, in offline, demographic shifts in the way that family constellations, aging societies, generations, etc. And also urbanization, for instance, in the way that we're seeing with digital development, smart homes, smart cities, but also how that will have an impact on our work lives, on our lives at home, and also the fluidity there. So let's see if this works. Very shortly, the Copenhagen Institute is a futures think tank. We're one of the oldest in the world, founded in 1969, not by the guy to the right, that I'm sure that you all know, but to the man to the left, Thorkild Kristensen, former finance minister in Denmark and Secretary General in the OECD. Our primary reason for being is to guide and equip decision makers around the world, both in public and private institutions, to help them think more structurally around the future. And when we do so, and what is really important for me to also communicate to you, is that we look at the future as multiple, as plural. We never just have one future, one linear projection that we see over and over again when companies tend to make their strategies. It's important for us to address the future as opening up the horizon and looking at what is plausible, what is probable, and also what is preferable. Because another thing is that we are not passive agents when it comes to the future. We actually have a say. Our actions can also inform the future. And this obviously also go for FTTH and also around how, all digital and technological development will be a part of impacting on our future lives. So it's really not about predicting, it is about preparing for the future. And as our founder is renowned to have said, if you do not think about the future, you might not have one. And why do we need to do that? Well, the reason is that we are flawed as human beings by default in terms of cognitive biases and fallacies, which is very much based on our current norms and values today, that kind of limits our ways of exploring future potential outcomes. This is an example from an American magazine in 1950 that really tried to predict what the future would look like in the year 2000. And they were really, really good at looking at potential digital and technological devices in the home. So you can see the flat screen TV, also the devices in the kitchen and the home as such is much more interconnected. One of my favorite is the one to the left here, the phono-vision receiver, they called it. So they were actually quite visionary in terms of technological developments. However, they completely neglected or weren't capable of actually looking at how we would change our norms and values. So if you can see, it's still quite typical gender roles. The husband coming back after a long days of work, the women at home. And also in terms of, for instance, our health values, the grandfather is smoking inside and next to the grandchild. So in terms of really understanding how we would apply technological advances it became much more difficult because we were positioned in the norms and values of the present times. And that is the interesting part that we need to be better at. Also, when we look at what will be the implications of much more digital lives, we tend to underestimate the long-term implications. And now I will see if this video.
But you know, yes. I think about this. And what about this internet thing? Do you know anything about that?
Sure.
What the hell is that exactly?
Well, it's become a place where people are publishing information.
Right.
So everybody can have their own homepage, companies are there, the latest information. It's wild what's going on. You can send electronic mail to people. It is the big new thing.
Yeah, but you know, it's easy to criticize something you don't fully understand, which is my position here.
Go ahead.
But I can remember a couple of months ago, there was like a big breakthrough announcement that on the internet or on some computer deal, they were going to broadcast a baseball game. You could listen to a baseball game on your computer. And I just thought to myself, does radio ring a bell?
So when we are actually really trying to envision, you know, these great implications that digital development might involve in our future lives, it can be quite difficult because we tend to underestimate. And this is something we need to be aware of. Then another thing is that we, like I said before, we need to open up our minds in terms of really thinking about potential outcomes. And decline is also an option. And when it comes to how we as consumers and people address and adopt technologies, we have been on kind of like a tech high for the last couple of decades, and now we're seeing how there is a potential digital backlash. So not just in terms of how there is a potential digital divide in who can access, but also we're becoming much more aware of how is our data being used, do we feel secure about the connection, how and who might access our digital footprint. So the future is definitely also about being much more anonymous in some sense.
The next sale is a digital treasure trove charming Ellie's private data.
What?
Lot number one, her emails. The one she's opened and read, wonderfully personal. Let's start at 240, 260, 280. Sold. Lot number two, Ellie's drugstore purchases. Voila! Priceless data. Do I hear 480? 500. Sold. Her location data. It's not creepy, it's commerce. Do I hear 600, 620, 640, 660? Sold.
Nana?
All her contacts, even sweet Nana. Sold at 740. Her recent transactions. Her browsing history. Her late-night texting habit. Sold. And now the one you've all been waiting for, and I can promise you won't be disappointed.
So this is something to be aware of also in terms of rising expectations from consumers in the future, that we need to be connected at all times, but we also need to feel safe and be able to trust the connections that we use. Now, one of the mega trends that I will also address in a few seconds is urbanization. Urbanization and rural areas, of course, go hand in hand in terms of how we will still need to be able to connect even when we leave the city. But also when we're thinking about how we're developing actually smart cities. The example here is Songdo in South Korea, developed to be one of the smartest smart cities, and everything in terms of the digital infrastructure was in place. It was a high of, you know, what was technologically feasible. And in the end, the real challenge was actually to make people want to live there. Because in the development of what was actually possible in terms of ways of communicating, trash handling and everything, creating a real community a sense of home, a sense of belonging within this smart city was actually something that was not taken into consideration. So people will always have to be a part of this equation, and we need to be also understanding what is actually making this feeling of community and belonging in online and offline worlds. Now, in order to navigate potential futures, we use the global megatrends, our global megatrend framework, and it's more or less these 14 greater global societal currents that we see are more or less stable. They're interconnected, they're dynamic, they will continue to develop. However, we see them happening over the next 10 to 15 years, and they will all impact and influence future consumer behavior. And as you can see, a lot is going on within technology and science. So engineering advances, greater interconnectedness, the AI and automation. You also see service economy, everything as a service, the network economy. We are digitally more and more networked and connected. But on the other side, we also need to relate to sustainability and climate change, to aging populations, to individualization and empowerment, focused on health, which is definitely rising. You see much more telemonitoring, health at home, something that is really needing a powerful infrastructure to be able to provide and help the demands from future consumers at home, and urbanization, obviously. Now, these all function as a way to influence our future consumer behaviors. And one of the impacts that we saw, especially kicking off during the pandemic, was this clear dependence on a good battery life and a very, very stable, strong, fast, and always connected Wi-Fi connection. And this is something that is definitely going to increase more and more. New needs will arise according to this, how we are interacting, how we're socially, moving in and out of online and offline worlds. And it's something that McKinsey said that within a matter of 3 months of the pandemic, technological adoption leaped for business and consumer behavior, leaped 10 years. Something is moving a little bit back to what it was prior to the pandemic, but definitely this is something that is guiding our lives going forward. What is really important when it obviously comes to future consumer behaviors is also to understand the differences between generations. Especially now we're living longer and longer, so it means that intergenerational communication, socializing, using digital services, connecting, communicating, is also somewhat dependent on which time you were born in. I always have a disclaimer when using generations because it's a bit of a too rigid structure, but it helps understand how we are all born within a certain time that has informed our values, our norms, and also the signature product that was kind of our entry into living with digital services and products and lives. Now, Generation Z is the first generation that has been brought up completely digitally. And this is something we also see in the way that they're actually perceiving themselves also going forward. So the digital world is becoming something that is more and more a place for identities and self-exploration. And more than 50% of Generation Z said that they feel more like themselves in the metaverse than in real life. So obviously that will push the demand forward in terms of, again, having those connections wherever we are, on the move, at home, at work, on holiday, and especially also with gaming and videos and everything really increasing in usage and demand. So I think that was all for me. I hope I have been able to inspire you a little bit in terms of future consumers. And please reach out afterwards.